Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today, we're taking a look at something that's, well, it's both incredibly simple and just shockingly effective.
It really is.
Yeah, check washing scams.
Mm.
So many people are like, checks. Who even uses checks these days?
Right.
Well, let me tell you, scammers do, and they are making a killing. We've got like research articles, we've got news stories, we've even pulled data from the U.S. Postal Service.
It's a lot.
Yeah, and this is a serious wake-up call.
Yeah, the thing is, this isn't just about those dusty old checkbooks people have tucked away somewhere. What we're seeing is how these scammers are taking these old methods and blending them with new tech.
It's crazy.
Especially mobile banking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's this fascinating and kind of unsettling intersection of the old and the new.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so before we really dive into how all this works, like the nitty-gritty, I think it's important to understand the human cost of this scam. We've got this case of Marianne Mandel, a business owner from Chicago, who lost almost $30,000 to check washing.
Oh, wow.
This isn't just, a number in a report. This is somebody's life, their livelihood, their peace of mind.
Absolutely. And her story really brings home that emotional and financial devastation that this crime can cause. And you know what? It highlights how vulnerable we all are, even if we think we're taking precautions.
Yeah, exactly. So can you walk us through what happened to Mandel? How did this even go down?
Sure. So Mandel sent out 3 checks in the mail. Pretty standard, right, for a
Yeah.
business owner. One for $375, another for $25, and a third for $300. But
Yeah.
somewhere between her mailbox and the bank, they were intercepted.
Okay.
And here's where things get really, really interesting. The thieves actually used chemicals to wash away the original ink.
Wait a minute. They wash the ink off the check.
Yeah.
How is that even possible? Is this a sophisticated operation with a whole lab set up?
It's not, and that's what's so crazy about it. It's surprisingly simple. And I think that's why it's so alarming.
Wow.
They use readily available chemicals, often acetone, nail polish remover,
No way.
to just dissolve the ink.
So they basically just erase the check.
Pretty much. And once that original writing is gone, they can just rewrite the payee and the amount. So that $25 check,
Yeah.
boom, turns into a $9,825 payday.
Oh my gosh, that's insane. I mean, I knew about check washing, but I always imagined it involved some complicated process. So you're saying anyone with a bottle of nail polish remover could potentially do this?
Essentially, yeah. It's like a low-tech crime with very high-tech consequences.
Yeah.
And here's the worst part. With mobile deposit becoming so common, they don't even need to walk into a bank to cash these altered checks.
Oh, so in Mandel's case, they just took those wash checks and deposited them using their phones. Did the banks not notice anything suspicious? How does that even get past them?
That's a huge question, and it's one that Mandel herself raised. She was really frustrated, and understandably so, that the bank's security measures didn't flag these obviously altered checks. I mean, we're talking about a $25 check suddenly becoming almost $10,000. Come on.
You'd think that would set off some alarms.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how good these fraud detection tools really are.
Yeah.
I mean, the American Bankers Association, they talk about the billions they spend on anti-fraud measures.
Yeah.
But are they really keeping up with these scams?
It's a very valid concern. They mention things like deposit reviews, hold policies.
Right.
But those might not be enough in cases like this, especially with the speed and convenience of mobile deposits. And while they do talk about their innovative solutions, we really need to see action, not just, vague promises.
For sure. And, speaking of technology, the Treasury Department is using AI to catch fraud on their own checks.
Mm-hmm.
Could that be an answer for banks, too? I mean, if the government can use AI to protect its money, surely banks can do the same for their customers.
That's a really interesting point. There's definitely a lot of potential for AI to play a bigger role in fighting check fraud.
Yeah.
But it also brings up questions about privacy and accuracy. We don't want a system where legitimate checks are getting flagged because of some algorithm glitch.
Yeah, nobody wants that. It's a tough balance. We want to be secure, but we don't want these overly cautious systems that make it impossible to, manage our own money.
Exactly. And we also need to remember that in Mandel's case, she actually did a lot of things right.
Really?
She used indelible ink, didn't leave any blank spaces on the checks, even dropped them off directly at the post office.
Wow.
And yet she still became a victim.
That's disturbing. So if those basic precautions aren't enough, what can people do to protect themselves? It almost feels like we're just at the mercy of these scammers.
I get it. It's not about being powerless, though. It's about understanding the vulnerabilities and demanding better solutions from the institutions that are supposed to be protecting us.
Right.
But before we get into all that, let's take a closer look at the scale of this problem and how the Postal Service is trying to crack down on mail theft.
All right, let's do it. I have to admit, this is all making me a little nervous. If someone can steal a check from a post office drop box, I mean, what chance do we even have?
Yeah, I get that feeling. It is a little unsettling, but, knowledge is power, right? The more we understand, how these scams work, where the vulnerabilities are, the better we can protect ourselves.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's talk numbers then. How big of a problem is check washing, really?
All right, so the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, they reported 26 cases in 2023 with, a total loss of almost $200,000.
It's already a lot.
It is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But get this year, they've already had 32 cases, and the losses are over $620,000.
Wow, that's more than triple.
Yeah.
So this is definitely on the rise.
It is.
But why now? Is it just because more people are banking online, or is there something else going on?
It's probably a combination of things, honestly. The pandemic really sped up that shift to digital banking,
For sure.
which created a lot of new opportunities for scammers. And at the same time, we've seen an increase in mail theft, which gives them access to those checks in the first place.
Right, you mentioned earlier that the Postal Service is trying to crack down on that mail theft. So what are they actually doing?
Well, they've put in place a number of measures. For one, they're stepping up surveillance around mailboxes and collection points.
Okay.
They're also working on, better security features for those blue collection boxes.
Yeah, the ones where you drop off your outgoing mail.
Exactly. Some of those, let's be honest, they look pretty old.
Some of them do, yeah.
So, it wouldn't be surprising if they were easy targets.
Yeah.
So they're upgrading them with, stronger locks, anti-pry features, things like that. And they're really encouraging people to report any suspicious activity.
So stronger boxes, more surveillance. That sounds like a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But what about the postal workers themselves? I mean, I've heard about carriers getting robbed for their master keys, which would give thieves access to, entire buildings worth of mail.
That's a really serious concern, and those incidents are on the rise, which is a huge problem. The Postal Service, they're trying to address that by providing better training for their carriers, better safety protocols.
Right.
And they're working with law enforcement to, investigate these crimes and hopefully prosecute them.
Right, so there's definitely effort being put into preventing mail theft, but it sounds like it's a tough battle.
It is. It really highlights how interconnected this whole problem is. We can't just focus on, one aspect, like just bank security or just mail safety.
Yeah, it's got to be like a multi-pronged.
It has to be a multi-pronged approach that involves everybody, like, the banks, the Postal Service, law enforcement, individuals, everyone.
So even with all these efforts, it seems like there's no guaranteed way to prevent check washing. That's kind of unsettling, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. There's always going to be some level of risk.
Right.
But there are things we can do to at least, minimize that risk. The American Bankers Association, they actually launched this campaign called #PracticeSafeChecks.
Okay, I've seen that hashtag. But honestly, it felt a little bit like, victim blaming. Like, just be more careful and you won't get scammed. It doesn't seem fair to put all the responsibility on individuals.
I totally get your skepticism, and you're right. It shouldn't just be about individual responsibility. Institutions need to, step up and really take ownership of their security measures. But at the same time, there are things we can do to make ourselves, less appealing targets.
Okay, so besides the obvious, like not leaving checks lying around, what are some concrete steps that people can take?
One simple thing is just using a gel ink pen. That gel ink is much harder to wash away than, say, regular ballpoint ink.
Really? I wouldn't have thought of that. Does the color matter too?
Yeah, actually. Black ink is best. It's more resistant to those chemicals that are used in check washing.
Okay.
And this is important. Avoid leaving any blank spaces on your checks, like, those lines for the amount of the payee.
Yeah.
Fill them in completely. Don't leave any gaps. It gives the scammers less opportunity to, tamper with it.
So use gel ink, write in black, and fill in all the blanks.
Yeah.
Got it. What else?
Sign up for USPS Informed Delivery. It's a free service. They send you email notifications with pictures of the mail you're supposed to be getting each day.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. So if someone steals a check from my mailbox, I'll know because it won't show up in my informed delivery email.
Exactly. It's simple, but it can really help you catch any issues early on. And then, whenever you can, think about using electronic payments instead.
Right. Online payments and mobile wallets, they're definitely becoming more common.
They are.
But what about those times when you absolutely need to write a check?
If you have to use a check, if at all possible, hand deliver it. Or, drop it off directly at the post office.
But wait, didn't Mandel drop her checks off at the post office?
You're right, she did.
And they were still stolen. So even that isn't foolproof.
You're right. It's not a guarantee. But it does at least, reduce the risk. And remember, it's all about layering these preventative measures. The more steps you take, the harder you make it for the scammers.
So it's really a combination of personal responsibility and, holding those institutions accountable. We have to do our part, but we also need banks and the Postal Service to create a safer system.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. If even these basic security measures aren't enough, what does that tell us about how financial crime is changing?
Right.
And what responsibility do these institutions have to protect people and businesses?
Those are some big questions, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah.
It's like we're always playing catch up with these scammers.
It's true. That's the thing about financial crime, right? It never sits still. It's always changing, finding new ways. And that's why it's so important for these institutions like the banks to be thinking ahead,
Right.
proactive, not just reactive.
Yeah.
Anticipating what's coming next, investing in the technologies and strategies that'll keep them a step ahead.
So what does that look like? Are we talking about like fancier algorithms, better security features, or something totally different?
Probably all of the above, honestly.
Okay.
Banks could be using machine learning to look at transaction patterns,
Mm-hmm.
to spot potentially fraudulent stuff, as it's happening.
Okay.
They could also be using like multi-factor authentication
Yeah.
for mobile deposits, adding that extra layer of security beyond just your username and password.
Right. Right. So what about the Postal Service? Anything they can do to, step up their game?
Well, I mean, they are taking steps, as we talked about,
Yeah.
but they could also be working more closely with banks, sharing data, looking for patterns.
Right.
Imagine if they could, flag a bunch of checks coming from a certain area that then get flagged as fraudulent by the banks. That kind of teamwork could be huge.
Absolutely. It's not just everyone working in their own little silo.
Exactly.
It's got to be like a system-wide thing, right?
It does. And it's not all about tech either. Education and awareness are important too. Banks need to do a better job of explaining to their customers about check washing, how it works, what they can do.
Right, yeah.
And the Postal Service, they could be doing more to let people know about mail theft,
Mm-hmm.
Encourage them to report anything that seems off.
Yeah, it feels like this whole issue often gets overlooked.
He does.
People think checks are so old school, so they don't even think about it. But as we've seen, scammers are definitely still using this. And the impact can be really bad.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that security isn't a one-and-done thing, It's ongoing. You can't just assume everything's taken care of. We've got to be aware, informed, and stay on top of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? What can our listeners do, to actually make a difference?
Well, first things first, stay informed, right? Keep up with what's going on, learn about new scams, the latest threats, tell your friends, your family. The more people who know about this stuff, the better we can fight it.
Makes sense?
And don't be afraid to ask questions, Challenge your bank, ask them about their security measures. Push for more transparency, more accountability from these institutions that are, holding your money.
Absolutely. We need to be active in protecting ourselves.
Exactly. It's not just about following the rules. It's about understanding the risks, asking those tough questions, and pushing for better solutions.
Well, this has really been an eye-opener. Check washing is one of those scams that, maybe doesn't get as much attention, but as we've learned, it is a serious problem. And the consequences can be huge.
Yeah.
I hope this has helped people, learn what they can do to protect themselves.
Yeah.
And also to push those institutions to do better, to protect our money.
It's a good reminder that we're all in this together,
Yeah.
We share knowledge, we raise awareness, we hold each other accountable, and hopefully we can make things a little safer for everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay safe out there.